And we are back with part 3 for June the 9th, Tuesday. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the article that I sent to you. It looks like this. If you have not read the article, it might be good for you to pre-read it. We're going to read it together as well right now, so whichever you prefer. Sometimes pre-reading, though, is, I know, gives a comfort level. This article is leveled at, I think, 950 Lexile level, so it's a pretty comfortable reading level for you all, I think. I chose this article because we all need some good news sometimes. There's been plenty of negative and sad news to last for a long time here in America and around the world in the last few months. So looked for a good news article, a feel-good article, we call them sometimes. And I also chose it because I am very sentimental, I guess. I love stories like this. I love stories where people find one another against the odds, okay? When we say something is against the odds, it's a way of saying, you know, when it's a very unlikely thing, but yet they come together. I love the stories where twins discover each other. They've been separated at birth and adopted in different homes, and then maybe through social media and other resources, they find one another. I love those kinds of stories. They really are feel-good stories. So when I saw this one, I chose it for us for this week. So what I would like to do is orally read the story, you reading along with me orally. Let's think about fluency. I'll try to set a good pace. And then we are going to do a lot of little things with it, because you probably noticed from the document that I sent, if you opened it, that the story is there, and then afterwards there is some comprehension work, and then there are some activities that I think you will enjoy. I did number the paragraphs so that those activities would be easier to locate. The things in the activities would be easier for you to locate with the numbered paragraphs. Once again, we have a news article where the title is really a sentence. It's not punctuated as a sentence because it doesn't have an ending mark. The words in the title are not uppercase. Each word doesn't begin with an uppercase letter. Remember that news articles, this is acceptable. This is considered writer's license with a news article. So that's what we have here. A nurse went to New York to work, found the firefighter who had saved her life. And this article comes from the Washington Post. So this is a coronavirus pandemic story. And let's read together. For more than 3 decades, Deidre Taylor wanted to meet the firefighter who saved her life. She only knew him through the grainy black and white photos on the front page of the New York Daily News. Grainy means that it's not very clear. We've all seen photographs that were old and black and white and not very clear. The photos appeared in the paper on December 30th, 1983. They showed Taylor, then only 4 years old, in the arms of the firefighter Eugene Pugliese, who had just carried her out of her burning apartment building. Taylor now works as a nurse in Alexandria, Virginia. She has kept the Daily News article all these years, and she had always wished she could find Pugliese and thank him. Her desire to thank him grew after she became an emergency room nurse. She learned how rare it was to hear back from patients she encountered on the worst days of their lives. However, she hadn't lived in New York since the fire and didn't know where to start. She would sometimes search his name on Google, but would not find anything. But finally, in March, Taylor thought she may have one last chance to find him. All right. Section 2, Searching for the Man Who Saved Her Life. With her family's support, she decided to move from Virginia to New York for 8 weeks to work in an overwhelmed Manhattan emergency room. She wanted to try to help save the lives of coronavirus patients while searching for the man who saved hers. When I was packing my bags, I packed the Daily News article with me, Taylor said. I told myself that one of the things I'm going to accomplish while I'm here is track him down, or track a family member down and just say thank you. Had he not been there, she said, I would not be alive today. Pugliese, who retired in 1996 and is now 75 years old, had never had someone track him down to say thank you before. Pugliese said he never forgot Taylor, and in fact, the Daily News front page article hung in his office for decades. Section 3, Highlight of Career. Saving her life was the highlight of his career, he said, and he still remembers the day clearly. He and several other firemen were fixing a broken pipe when a man came running up yelling that there was a fire. Pugliese followed him, taking off at a sprint. A sprint is a very fast run. The man guided him to the 6th floor apartment where thick smoke was billowing out. Billowing means almost like the clouds, okay? Growing. The smoke was billowing out, and Pugliese went in. He called out for anyone inside before finding an apartment engulfed in flames. Engulfed means to be totally covered in or totally involved in, and in this case, flames. Taylor's mother was crying, my baby, Pugliese remembered. He quickly helped her out of the room before returning on his hands and knees, crawling through the burning and blinding smoke for about 6 feet when he felt the child. She was unconscious. He carried her to the living room where he gave her mouth to mouth to bring her back. Now we would normally, I think, say mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, CPR, but sometimes it's okay to just to say mouth-to-mouth. He rushed down the 6 flights of stairs to get her to an ambulance, when to Pugliese's relief, she woke up and started to cry. I was just in the right place at the right time, Pugliese said, and thank God we were there. Pugliese later received a medal for Taylor's rescue in a ceremony that is among his most prized memories of his time as a firefighter. Taylor's first 2 weeks in New York were overwhelming. As she dealt with patient after patient struggling to breathe, something I'll never forget, she said. During her time off, she went to the firehouse where Pugliese had worked, only to find a sign on the door discouraging visitors due to COVID-19. Taylor finally caught a break on May 18th, when a group of firefighters came to the emergency room to deliver the medical staff pizzas for dinner to show their appreciation. Taylor quickly asked them how she might be able to find a retired fireman. One of the firemen gave her a phone number to connect her with the fire chief. She called and explained her mission to find Eugene Pugliese once more, all the while bracing herself for bad news. "Oh, Gene?" the chief told her. "He stops by the firehouse all the time." "I couldn't believe it," Taylor said. "I really didn't think he was still going to be around." The chief phoned Pugliese right away, and less than an hour later, Taylor's phone rang. "It's Gene Pugliese," he said. "I'm the firefighter who rescued you that day." Finally, Taylor was able to tell him what she had been meaning to say for years. Life after the rescue. Pugliese told her the story of the fire, and she told him the story of her life afterward. They learned they had plenty in common. For example, both had been in the military, and both were die-hard Yankee fans. After the call, Pugliese said, "I cried for the rest of the day." Pugliese said that learning that the toddler he saved all those years ago is now an emergency room nurse on the front lines of the pandemic has been especially meaningful to him. The fire chief who recommended he be given a medal for saving Taylor's life recently died of COVID-19. Taylor and Pugliese would have liked to meet in person, but Taylor said it's too risky, given that she is in contact with COVID-19 patients every day. However, they hope to meet in the future. "I'd love to go to a Yankees game with her once this has subsided," he said. Okay, a little bit of a tearjerker, I think. It's a sweet story and a feel-good story for a change. Just reviewing it briefly, I want to mention a couple of things. First of all, we see the writer using both the young lady's first name and last name through the article. Sometimes I find that confusing. Mostly he has, or she, I don't know who, has used the last name, but sometimes that can be a little confusing as we go through news articles. In this case, at least, we're talking just basically two names. Sometimes there are many, and it does get confusing. I like the way the first part of this article gives a good sort of history of the story. It doesn't go into great detail about the history, but it gives us that good introduction that we've talked about as being so important. In news articles like this, the introduction is not often just one paragraph, it may be several, and that's the case here. But I do think the hook comes very quickly in this article. I see it really in that very first line. For more than 3 decades, Deidre Taylor wanted to meet the firefighter who saved her life. When you read that, you want to read more. I call that a good hook, because immediately I think, did she meet him? How did she meet him if she did? I want to know more. However, the introduction continues, it gives this background information, and then there's kind of like another hook right at the very end. But finally, in March, Taylor thought she might have one last chance to find him. So, once again, the writer of this article is leading us to read more, to continue right along. In the next section, we get more detail about then her plans to search. And she finds support in this plan from her family, I'm sure probably from friends. But what a brave adventure for this young woman. And I have read numerous stories during the pandemic about nurses and doctors who leave one area where the pandemic is under control or very light, and temporarily gone to live in another area where the pandemic is raging, and they put their lives on the line. They leave their families behind, and they go and they do this for just purely, for the goodness of others. And I'm just amazed that people do that, and so grateful. And this is the case with Deidre, but she had an alternative plan as well, to spend this time in New York, and maybe this would be her opportunity to find him. She uses the phrase track him down a couple of times. That's another way of saying that we are going to find someone. When we track someone down, we are on their trail, so to speak. We are trying to follow clues to find them. All right, and then the writer shifts to giving us a little bit of Pugliese's history and his career in this next section. And he tells the story briefly, but he tells it with a lot of passion. He remembers this incident so very well. I can't really imagine that as a firefighter for his entire life, many years in a career, how many times he probably saved people. But this seems to have been a story that stayed very much in his mind. He even kept the news article on the wall in his office, and he received a medal in a ceremony to honor his work. So this was a very significant part of all of the thousands of days of his career where he saved lives. But I was amazed at the detail that he remembered and shared. And then the author goes forward to talk a little bit about then Taylor's time in New York and how intense the work was. And then when she would leave work, she would some days try to go to the fire department or make phone calls or whatever other means of searching that she might do. And she kept kind of coming up empty, right? Didn't get to where she needed to be. But I have a feeling that she would have continued to persevere. Persevere, it means to keep pushing, as long as she was in New York, I feel that she would have continued because this was very important. And then such a wonderful break happened for her, and she got this opportunity by talking to these firemen who brought pizzas for the staff. That's another thing that I've heard about so much during the pandemic. People taking food into emergency rooms or into doctor's offices, and leaving that for the hungry staff who doesn't get time to go out and eat. And it's a very generous and kind thing to do. And that turned out to be her lucky break, getting to talk with those firemen and say, hey, do you know how I could find someone? And I think the most special part of that is that she was in the right place at the right time, because she could have so easily been with patients and not actually seeing these firefighters when they brought the pizzas in. She could have been taking a break and been in another part of the hospital. So it was very fortunate, a very blessed moment that she had to actually have this conversation. I'm going to pause and I'll be right back.